Percy Jackson and the Olympians had a number of red flags, the most prominent being the race swapping of the various main characters, including Annabeth, Chase, and Grover. And we are getting more confirmation that this show is indeed woke and was woke from the very get go. Before we get into this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. With that out of the way, let's get into this. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. Headline reads, Percy Jackson and the Olympians executive producer Becky Riordan. One of the first things we talked about, how to not have a patriarchal lens. Why in the world would you ever talk about this when creating a story? It is absolutely absurd and stupid on its face, and it leads to disaster because you're not focusing on telling a good, solid story. You're focusing on a patriarchal lens, whatever that even means. It probably just means anything anti-male. Let's get into this here. Speaking with Variety about the show and specifically how they made Medusa into a victim of sexual abuse, Becky Riordan explained the reason why they didn't include the sexual abuse narrative about Medusa in the original novels. She said the only reason Medusa is not more fleshed out in the books was that it was Percy's narrative and we don't have her perspective. As a 12-year-old boy in 2005, I don't think he had the bandwidth for deconstructing the patriarchy, said her husband, Rick Riordan, the creator of the series. He was looking at it as, this is a scary woman who's trying to turn me into stone. Maybe you should have stuck with that, because that is what actually resonated with people, and that's what people expected to have in their show, that you're adapting from the books, not some sexual abuse narrative where Medusa is now pretending to be a victim. It's ridiculous. This is Disney to the T, trying to make bad people righteous and good, and thus showing that those people's values and morals are good when they're clearly doing bad, evil things. It's stupid. Fortunately, the show doesn't actually show that. It's just these idiots talking about it. But before we get to that, Becky Riordan confirmed that not giving the show a patriarchal lens was one of the main goals for the series. She said it was one of the first things we talked about, how to not have a patriarchal lens. She doesn't really explain that any further. So she doesn't. So who knows if it's just a virtue signal or if it's something they actually did put in the show? It's unclear. But they definitely try to imply that Poseidon is a monster and all of these things. I guess maybe that's what they were coming from. They specifically depicted Medusa as a victim of sexual assault, or at least they tried to. Like this was what their intention was. I'm not sure if they actually did that, having watched the scene. But the actress who plays Medusa, Jessica Parker Kennedy, has this to say in the show as she's playing Medusa. This is kind of how it plays out. She says, Athena was everything to me. I worshiped her. I prayed to her. I made offerings. She never answered, not even omen to suggest she appreciated my love. Obviously, she doesn't say it like that. It's very soft and it's kind of creepy the way how slow she says it and how soft she says it. And then she tells Annabeth, I wasn't like you, sweetheart. I was you. I would have worshipped her that way for a lifetime in silence. But then one day another god came and he broke that silence. Your father, obviously talking to Percy Jackson, the sea god told me that he loved me. I felt as though he saw me in a way I had never seen before. But then Athena declared that I had embarrassed her and that I needed to be punished. Not him. She decided that I would never be seen again by anyone who would live to tell the tale. So I'm not really sure how that makes her out to be a victim of sexual abuse. That part doesn't at all. It seems like she willingly decided to embrace him. They had it probably was wrong for him to try and manipulate her or try and seduce her. Obviously, monogamy is something that should be celebrated, but you're dealing with Greek gods, and they did all of these things, and that is one of the reasons why you point to them as being wrong, and why indeed the Greeks converted to to Christianity. But yeah, it's utterly ridiculous here. That doesn't even make any sense. But we do get this part here where she eventually confronts Percy by herself, and she says, "Your mother and I were like sisters in a way, targeted by the same monster. So I find myself feeling protective of you." So she's referring to Poseidon as a monster. And then I guess that is the implication that it's sexual abuse. We'll get to where they actually say this. And then she tries to like seduce Percy, saying, where is she now, your mother? Is she safe? And do you trust your friends to help you to make her safe? Will they let you make her safe if it conflicts with their quest? I could help you remove them from the equation so you can be free of them if you ask me to. It's just ridiculous. It's like you need to probably win their trust before you go out making these absurd suggestions about offing your friends that you're just made. Pretty awful dialogue storytelling here. Pretty bad. Nevertheless, Percy Jackson refuses, is then pursued by Medusa through her statue garden that's just randomly in like the basement of her house, I guess. They just randomly show up there, who threatens to turn them into stone. Jackson kills Medusa after Athena's daughter puts an invisibility device on her, allowing him to open his eyes and strike her. So Annabeth Chase puts the invisibility cloak or invisibility device, whatever it is. So he can't see her. This is what the actress had to say to Variety about this, which just I think doesn't really make any sense. But anyway, she said, John wrote a story of Medusa thinking that Poseidon was someone she could trust, and he broke that trust. She was feeling safe, and then the situation turned unsafe. No actual explanation of that in the scene at all. We don't see that whatsoever. So who really knows what is even going on here? Again, sounds like a virtue signal. Sounds like something she made up in her own head. Then she added, so I chose to play that she was a victim of rape and total abandonment, not understanding why Athena would turn on her. She later added, she's so stylish and grounded and calm, and that is hugely a front for the trauma she's trying to hide. She does all of these really awful things and becomes a terrible person, but I wanted her to feel almost frighteningly calm and kind. I didn't want her to have a scary voice. I wanted it to feel gentle, but I also wanted to leave a layer of how we know crap's gonna go bad. But let's go back to this part where she says she said she was a victim of rape and total abandonment. That's literally the opposite of what she tells Annabeth Chase. Says here, the sea god told me that he loved me. I felt as though he saw me in a way I had never felt seen before. So doesn't sound like she was raped. Just utterly ridiculous. So who even knows what these people are doing? But they're clearly trying to signal to the press that we are an ultra woke show. And when people are telling you what they are, you should believe them. And then as far as this patriarchy stuff here, we did get these comments from Becky Riordan a little bit later on in that Variety interview. She was specifically talking about how they removed the patriarchal lens and how this fighting Medusa is part of the Percy Jackson story. And she said that the studio execs were like, oh, this is going to be a story about Percy gaining his father's love and respect. And it's like, no, that's not the story. He has to go through, what has my father done? Has he changed? How do I see myself in relationship to that? And then Rick added, Percy can only judge his father by the wreckage he has left behind. So it looks like it's all about questioning your father and kind of pulling him off the pedestal that you might have of him. But it's not just about that either, because they talk about that with Annabeth Chase. So I don't really understand what they're talking about with the patriarchal stuff, but it does look like it is definitely a virtue signal. Whether it wasn't, I don't think it's in this Medusa scene at all. Whether or not it's in the rest of the show, who knows? I wouldn't be surprised, because these people have been preaching the woke for over a year now about the show, and then lying to people, gaslighting people, saying it was going to be the closest thing they've ever done to the books. It was going to be pretty much a direct adaptation. And then we're getting all of these other changes and things like this. And we're now having them tell us Medusa is a victim of sexual abuse. It's just utterly ridiculous. I have no intention of watching this show. I will be covering it for idiotic things that they say like this. But I don't recommend the show at all, based on all the press coming out about it and all the things that Rick Riordan and his wife have said about the show and how they have indeed promoted it. But those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you guys think about this. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.